White House bureau chief at Politico, Jonathan Lemire. MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle is with us right off the top. And U.S. special correspondent for BBC News, Katty Kay. And President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haass, joins us for the conversation this morning as well.
When people see Richard, they think we're going to immediately jump into... and why they come here, and it drives you crazy whenever we talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it. Because, it's just a little break in proceedings. Sometimes things get a little...
Yeah.
Let's talk about India's elections, Richard.
What?
Not what you expected. I gotta say, whoa! There are very few election results where you're just absolutely surprised. I think Poland was one of them last year, where Tusk, despite the fact that he had all of the disadvantages and none of the advantages, that the Law and Justice Party basically controlled all the levers of government, were using them to defeat Tusk in Poland. What happened in India was maybe more shocking. All we've heard for the past couple of years is how Modi is this growing autocrat. He's one of the most popular and beloved figures in the world. He has complete control over India. He's like a grandfather. Except you've heard it all, on and on and on. A shocker last night, a shocker yesterday, that, he's got to grub around like an actual politician and make alliances with parties he doesn't like to have a majority.
All correct. The world's largest democracy has gone to the polls, and a real upset in the sense everyone was predicting a landslide. It was anything but. The BJP, the Hindu Nationalist Party of the Prime Minister, got the most votes. It's a plurality party, but it did not get, as widely predicted and expected, an outright majority. The Prime Minister gets a third term for only the second time in Indian history. But again, it's a disappointment. Exactly as you say, he has to cobble together a coalition with parties that don't share his Hindu nationalist cultural dreams for India. I think it's a real pushback on inflation, a real pushback on inequality in India. And you're right. I think it's actually a good thing, though, Joe, for Indian democracy.
Yeah.
It was becoming something hard.
All right, let's go to our top story this morning. The Wall Street Journal is out with a new piece entitled "Behind Closed Doors, Biden Shows Signs of Slipping." The Journal says it spoke with both Republicans and Democrats who either participated in meetings with Biden or were briefed on them contemporaneously, but essentially only on the record. Republican critics in the article. The one is former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. The Journal writes, quote, "Last year, when Biden was negotiating with House Republicans to lift the debt ceiling, his demeanor and command of the details seemed to shift from one day to the next," according to then House Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
By the way, they also quoted Mike Johnson, people around Mike Johnson, and admit that this was basically House Republicans whacking.
Why didn't they just ask Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Well, exactly.
To
Why did? They could have.
And Lauren Boebert.
Yeah, it's really shocking, especially when you see what Kevin McCarthy has said repeatedly, publicly and behind the scenes about Biden on those same days when they were negotiating.
The strong feelings you're seeing about this article comes also because the context of this race and these two candidates. It's interesting. That's all I'll say. Anyhow, that flies in the face of what McCarthy said about Biden's effectiveness in the past. From Politico last year, quote, "McCarthy mocked Biden's age and mental acuity in public."
In public, like he did in this article.
While privately telling allies that he found the president sharp and substantive in their conversations. A contradiction that left a deep impression on the White House. This from the New York Times. Privately, Mr. McCarthy has told allies that he has found Mr. Biden to be mentally sharp in meetings. And this from The Hill. Very professional, very smart, very tough at the same time. McCarthy told reporters at the Capitol of his talks with Biden.
Willie, I could go on and on with things that Kevin McCarthy and others have said about negotiating with Joe Biden. I could also talk about what the French delegation said when they were negotiating with him and what they told me. And friends that I have in that French delegation who were part of those negotiations who said that Macron came out like, wow, okay, it's a lot tougher than we expected. And actually, I think Macron sort of got his back up because Biden was pressing so hard. Can tell you the same thing about Middle Eastern leaders that I talked to. Nobody's saying he's not cogent. And some people are suggesting that he, it's a bit too tough in negotiations, that the United States throws their weight around a little bit too much. But what I find so shocking about this article is they go to Kevin McCarthy as their main source and other House Republicans. The same House Republicans, Mike Johnson, who just there lied through his teeth repeatedly. Mike Johnson, who got to power based on the big lie. And they're using people around Johnson and Kevin McCarthy to do this Trump hit piece on Joe Biden. But again, here's the quote. Kevin McCarthy mocked Biden's age and mental acuity in public. This is from Politico last year, while privately telling allies that in private he found the president to be sharp and substantive. And I've talked to you about my meetings with the president over the past year, Willie, and talked to Mike and Meek about it, and I said it in real time. The guy, see both those guys right there? I've spent time with both of those guys privately. I've spent time with Biden and Trump privately. I've spent time with every House Speaker over the past 30 years and Joe Biden. It's just not close. If you want to talk about international affairs, if you want to talk about how to get bipartisan legislation, Joe Biden is light years ahead of all of them. And the fact that the Wall Street Journal knew these quotes were out there, that editors, I'm not looking at the reporter. People always blame the reporter. There are a line of editors behind every story that's done. The editors saw that Kevin McCarthy had a habit of saying one thing in public, lying in public, and then privately telling his aides just the opposite. That Biden was sharp, that he was cogent, that he was substantive. And in the same meeting that Kevin McCarthy is now telling the Wall Street Journal Biden was out of it, he went out and he told reporters after the meeting that the meeting was, quote, the best yet. We're making progress, and I'm going to be talking to Joe Biden every day. Very professional, very smart, very tough. I don't even know what to say. I really don't even know what to say here.
Well, let's begin with the fact that Joe Biden is 81 years old. Donald Trump, by the way, will be 78 next week, so he's not much younger. So, yes, does he move a little slower and speak a little softer than he did 15 years ago when he was vice president, as former Speaker McCarthy says in the piece? Sure does. Yeah. I think most 81-year-olds do, or most people are different than they were 15 years ago. This does have the feeling of Trump acolytes laundering their attacks through a reputable, prestigious news organization in the Wall Street Journal. Also, the point about notes, as Richard Haas would tell you, presidents use notes in meetings. That's not unusual. They might have a sheet, they might have a card in front of them with some points that they want to make. I would also point out Donald Trump has a person who follows him with a printer to print things out for him so he can have hard copies, so he can read his notes and facts and lies often that he rattles off. And then the other point to make is, will the Wall Street Journal have a piece about Donald Trump and his mental acuity? All you have to do is watch the 90 minutes of that Fox News interview over the weekend, and you could go through and do an entire series of articles on someone who doesn't seem to have it all together. Mike Barnicle, you're very plugged into the White House. What's the early reaction to this piece?
You can't say it on the air. You just can't say it on the air what your reaction is, actually. But, you know, I am sort of actually embarrassed for the Wall Street Journal with this piece. And there's one, at least to me and others, Richard, anyone who has spent any time at all, Joe, Mika, anybody who has spent any time at all with Joe Biden knows one thing about Joe Biden above all else. He's a talker. He's a talker. So here's the tell in this piece. With Ukraine running out of munitions, the White House called together top lawmakers to discuss what it would take to get congressional funding, along with the scope of border security changes demanded by Republicans. The president moved so slowly around the cabinet room to greet the nearly 24 congressional leaders that it took about 10 minutes for the meeting to begin, some people who attended recalled. 24 people around a table, and it took them 10 minutes to go around. I'm amazed that it didn't take them an hour. Everyone he meets, he has 10 minutes to talk to them about. Everyone. So this was a classic hit piece, probably ordered up by the 93-year-old, fifth-time married Rupert Murdoch over the weekend. Probably, you know? But, I mean, this piece is so tilted, so off the mark. Is he 81 years old? Yes. Is he a bit slower in terms of his reactions to some things? Probably. That I don't know. We don't know. I do know, Richard, and you've talked to people, I'm sure, who have been with him in national security meetings. I've been with people who have been with him in the Situation Room, where he literally goes around the globe on the chart in the Situation Room. I've never been in there, but electronically, and points out the weaknesses and the strengths of the United States relationships with each and every country that he's talking about, with no notes. With no notes. He's an 81-year-old president of the United States who gets up every day. He's got to deal with Bibi Netanyahu in the morning, Ukraine, about 10 minutes later. His son is on trial. His son is an addict. It's on his mind all the time. This piece is outrageous.
Yeah, but Mike, it's not that complicated. It's just not, you know, we don't have to talk.
Look at who they quote.
We don't have to talk to anybody, Richard, but the person they quote, Kevin McCarthy, who is the source. Again, Kevin McCarthy, who is on actually a sort of a PR tour right now to clean up the fact, and Politico's written a story about this, the fact that he lies. The fact that he bounces back and forth. He's trying to go on basically a PR tour. But we don't have to ask world leaders, but please feel free to jump in. Let's just talk to the guy that was the source of this story and quoted. McCarthy mocked Biden's aides in mental acuity in public while privately telling allies in private he found the president to be sharp and substantive. He called him very professional, very smart, very tough. And this same meeting, again, that the Wall Street Journal is basing this story on Kevin McCarthy's lies. Kevin McCarthy's lies, which it's in the press. There is a mountain of quotes from Kevin McCarthy and people around Kevin McCarthy saying that Biden is sharp. He's mentally sharp, privately. So go ahead, talk about what I talked about, talking to world leaders, talking to, but again, it's just not complicated.
No, it's not.
They went to a guy who has admitted that he lies in public and that privately Biden is very sharp.
Joe, 2 Republican speakers have been up for recall in the recent past. Kevin McCarthy and Mike Johnson. Democrats saved Mike Johnson with their votes. They refused to save Kevin McCarthy when he was up, and he's out. Why? Because it was universal, even from Republicans and Democrats. Kevin McCarthy is a liar. That's why he didn't get the support.
It's also really odd this story comes out now. Think about the last week. Joe Biden has come forward with 3 major new policies. A ceasefire initiative in the Middle East, a new weapons targeting policy for Ukraine, and an entirely different policy on the border. 3 enormous issues, 3 new policies. This, you may like the policies, you may not, but this is clearly a president who is driving an agenda.
So we can quote some of the White House response. White House Communications Director Ben LaBolt tweeted last night, "It's a complete and utter editorial fail." We know the White House spokesperson Andrew Bates is quoted repeatedly in the story denying a lot of it. And we will note that one of the examples cited in the piece was about energy policy. And then other reporters have already been fact-checking on Twitter today, saying that actually what the president said represented what the Biden administration's policy was. So it was perhaps Speaker Johnson and the Republicans in the room who got it wrong. They may have disagreed with the policy.
Who got confused.
Right. They may have disagreed with the policy, but it was the president who did accurately say what the administration wanted. I mean, this is This is a storyline, of course, that deeply upsets the White House. They understand, privately, it is a real one, that polls suggest that Americans are concerned about the president's age. That is simply true. They do feel, of course, and they point to the White House physician and the physical the president receives every year, saying he is very much up for the job. It is a storyline that had faded some in recent months after the president's State of the Union, where he delivered a vigorous performance. Some of the other moments since, he is seen as doing well. It's true, he sits for fewer interviews than his predecessors, though he did just do a big one for Time magazine that printed yesterday. It's true that Americans don't hear him unscripted as much as we heard other presidents. All of that is accurate. However, a lot of this still applies to Donald Trump as well, and we have gone through on the show repeatedly how he has slipped as well, and he has shown signs of age caddy. So it does feel like this is a moment here with Trump reeling after the verdict, and we wait to see how that's going to play out, that it's Republicans trying to revive what they think could be an effective storyline.
Yeah, and one perhaps White House response might be, and Andrew Bates is kind of hinting at this in this piece, is the degree to which we haven't really seen very much of the unscripted Joe Biden, and will we start seeing that pick up as the campaign gets hotter? I think a lot of us would like to see Joe Biden out in public more. We'd like to see him doing more interviews, certainly with us journalists, which he hasn't done very many of. And it's the State of the Union, as you're saying, John, did a lot to kind of put these stories to rest for a little while. So when he's out there, he has performed well when he's got those big moments. There has been some sense that this campaign has tried very much to kind of corral Joe Biden and keep him out of the public eye, not give him much interaction with journalists. Maybe that's something that needs to change a little bit. Maybe actually more Joe Biden is better, and we'll certainly see him at the debate. But when he is out performing and talking about policy and doing the kinds of policies and implementing them as we've been hearing on energy and the border, then actually that seems to his benefit. More Joe Biden, not less, may be a strategy that helps them.
Well, I mean, and by the way, that's a legitimate story. You could. That's a story. He's not as available as past presidents or whatever it may be. But as Richard says, well, first of all, he's passed more bipartisan legislation than any president in a generation. And you look at the past week, how busy the past week has been. And I just want to say, first of all, I am loath to attack the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, these papers, Caddy, that do such remarkable work day in and day out, and they do. Listen, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, I read it every day. I disagree with it maybe half the time, but half the time I'm like, glad somebody's saying this, right? I think the Wall Street Journal editorial page, even when it makes me angry, reading what they say, it's really necessary. It's important for our democracy. But as you know, the Wall Street Journal news side of things has always had an extraordinary reputation inside and outside of Washington, both Democrats and Republicans alike. So I do not want to paint with a broad brush here, especially considering the new editor, Emmett Tucker. I'm a big fan. I don't understand this story. I think it's unfair, but it's pretty remarkable, I think, what Emmett Tucker's done in her short time at the Wall Street Journal, and I wish her and whatever's happening at the Washington Post, though I have no idea what the hell's happening at the Washington Post, I wish them all the best of luck. But this is, again, deeply troubling that they would base a story at this time in a campaign on House Republicans who have a record of lying. That is not opinion. That is fact. And we have the specific lies in front of us about Kevin McCarthy saying one thing publicly and another thing behind closed doors that undermine this story.
Yeah, I agree with you on the Wall Street Journal. I like the fact that when I read it, I don't know what to expect from the opinion pages. It's always refreshing to find media outlets, particularly in this age, where people are saying things that are counterintuitive to their party line. And I think the Journal does a good job of that, and certainly their news reporting, not just in the States, but around the world. They have great reporters in Ukraine. They have great reporters in the Middle East and in Africa. So they have done a very good job. In this piece, I think they fell short in not pointing out that McCarthy is being quoted on the record in previous occasions as saying one thing and meaning another thing. And to rely on him as your one quoted source when he has a track record of speaking, let's say, duplicitously on some of this, I think it means the piece falls short. It doesn't quite hold the credibility it could do if they had taken the point to, time to point that out. And we will gloss over the British takeover of American newsrooms at the moment.
But
just move on from that, Richard Haass.
We'll do that.
It is happening. Well, you have the Wall Street Journal, the
CNN, the Washington
Post,
yeah.
CNN, and now the British are coming.
An executive order yesterday that will shut down asylum requests at the southern border when crossings spike. Under the order, border officials will stop accepting requests when daily encounters reach an average of 2,500 migrants at legal point of entry. The shutdown will go into effect immediately as Department of Homeland Security officials say encounters have reached 4,000 migrants daily. The border will only reopen once the number falls to 1,500 migrants. Speaking at the White House, the president said he would have preferred to do this with Congress, but Republicans blocked that effort. Take a listen.
Republicans in Congress, not all, but walked away from it. Why? Because Donald Trump told them to. He told the Republicans, it has been published widely by many of you, that he didn't want to fix the issue. He wanted to use it to attack me. Today, I'm moving past Republican obstruction and using the executive authorities available to me as president to do what I can on my own to address the border. Frankly, I would have preferred to address this issue through bipartisan legislation because that's the only way to actually get the kind of system we have now that's broken, fixed. For those who say the steps I've taken are too strict, I say to you that be patient. And goodwill of American people are wearing thin right now. Doing nothing is not an option. We have to act. We must act consistent with both our law and our values.
He's getting hammered by both sides. Republicans saying it's not enough. Of course, these are the same Republicans who had the best deal they could have possibly gotten.
Yeah.
With one of the most conservative Republicans in the Senate putting it forward. But Republicans, of course, who have no credibility on this issue because they killed it for political reasons, are attacking him. And then the left also attacking Biden for saying that it goes too far. I would just remind everybody that Barack Obama got hammered nonstop over his 8 years for being the deporter in chief. And all I will say is that before Donald Trump became president, when Barack Obama left, illegal border crossings at the southern border were a 50-year low.
Yeah, I'm just so glad he was able to get those words out. And, with all the struggling and difficulty that he's having.
Isn't it unbelievable? All the things.
I was on the edge of my seat.
That
thinking, my God, what is going to happen?
Plus, more help and weapons for Ukraine.
Joining us now.
Plus getting in the middle of a peace process in the Middle East. My goodness.
He's just so bumbling.
Yeah. Wow.
Joining us now, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale. So, Ali, what's the president's goal here? Obviously, criticism from both sides on this. Not everybody is pleased. What's he doing?
Not everybody is pleased, but I think what's so important in what the president said in announcing this executive order is the fact that they could have done this through Congress. And the very action that he took here in trying to stem the number of asylum claims that are happening at the southern border was a central tenet of that bipartisanly negotiated deal. It was one of the things that Republicans who were at the negotiating table felt that they had really gotten a win on. And it was a concession for Democrats, especially when you look at the reaction from some progressives right now who are saying that this goes way too far. Of course, it's going to get tied up in courts, but that's what you get when you don't do this through a legislative route. The politics of this, though, has never been far from the policymaking. In large part, that's why we did not end up with any kind of vote that succeeded on this bill in the first place in the Senate, despite the fact that there was a blessing from Senate Republican leadership for Senator Lankford to be in those negotiating rooms cobbling together this deal. Again, we cannot underscore it enough. The reason it fell apart is because Donald Trump wanted to keep this as a live ball in the election. Republicans fell in line behind that. We watched that in the vote totals, not just when this vote fell apart in February, but when it fell apart 2 weeks ago, Senator Chuck Schumer doubled back to the table, trying to put this front and center to say Democrats are trying to put forward something that could show forward progress on stemming the flow at the southern border. Republicans, Schumer was saying at the time, wouldn't go along. And then 2 weeks later, you have Biden coming along with this executive order saying that he would have done it through Congress, but they were blocking him from doing so. So election year politics are so tied up in this. And there's a reason that Democrats are trying to put the spotlight on this too, of course, which you guys well know, which is that polling shows that this is an issue that works well for Republicans. Democrats are trying to wrest back some control of the news cycle, infuse some fact into it, which is to say they wanted to try to do something on this, but they couldn't get it together in bipartisan fashion, again, because Trump wanted to scuttle the deal. The politics are so central to this, and it's why we're going to continue seeing this as a live football, as it always is. We've covered Trump for a long time. Every time he's in a tough spot on the campaign trail, this is his favorite issue, his pet child to go back to and try to stem the flow of anger from voters onto this issue. You look in places like Arizona where there's a tight Senate race, Kari Lake and Ruben Gallego. This is going to be one of the issues that could turn the Senate map, and we're talking tight margins as we always are, so every race matters. Arizona, Montana, all of the rest of those, this is going to be key.
So, Allie, as you say, Republicans say too little, too late. Of course, the irony of that is they had the legislation they asked for and turned their backs on it because Donald Trump told them to. Also, progressives say, as you mentioned, they'll tie this up in court with appeals. So is there a sense that this actually will be implemented at some point, that this executive order will actually take hold, or does it just feel more like an election year attempt to get votes?
Right now, I don't get the sense that people are under the assumption that this is going to be enacted immediately. The expectation was, in my conversations with lawmakers yesterday, both those on the Democratic side who appreciate this move and then those who say it goes too far, the assumption was that this was never going to become something that was actually put in practice. And many of those people would double back and say the exact same thing that we've been saying, which is that if this was done through a legislative route, you would have a harder time with the court challenges. That's not to say that they wouldn't still have come up, but when things are done unilaterally out of the White House, especially like this and on this issue, of course you're going to see the legal challenges immediately. That's the expectation that I've heard from lawmakers on the Hill. Again, some of whom on the Democratic side didn't want to be anywhere near this, were critical of the White House. Even those folks, though, allow that this is an issue that Democrats need to deal with, need to talk about. It's going to be so central to the way that voters vote and make their decisions in November.
NBC's Ali Vitale on Capitol Hill to defend the building behind Ali on January 6th are continuing their fight to protect democracy. Harry Dunn, Aquilino Ganell, and Daniel Hodges have been fanning out across swing states recently to make the case for re-electing President Biden in November. You ran for Congress in the state of Maryland, fell a little bit short there, but did have some money left over from that campaign. So tell us more about what you plan to do with it in this initiative.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. It's always good to be on with you all. Yeah, we did fall short, but the reason why I ran was to do everything I can do to continue to fight for democracy, to fight to preserve our Constitution, and to fight to stop MAGA extremists, and at the very top of the ticket, Donald Trump. And yeah, we did raise millions of dollars in a very short period of time. And what that told me is that a lot of people across the country, that message of our democracy, the threat of losing it, the threat of this being our potential last free and fair election. It resonates with a lot of people. It worries a lot of people, and it's at the top of people's minds. So what we're going to do is to continue to use that momentum to continue to go across the country, up and down the ballot, and elect Democrats and stop MAGA Republicans. And also use the fight to continue to get big corporate money out of politics and support those candidates that really want to do that.
So, Harry, when you were out there running for Congress and meeting a lot of people and talking to a lot of people, that aspect that you just mentioned, the threat to democracy, when you would talk to people about the threat to democracy, how many of the people you spoke to thought it was like real, that it could happen, as opposed to...
No, it worries a lot of people. It worries a lot of people because, like I said, a lot of the issues that, we talk about, codifying Roe v. Wade and common sense gun reform, lowering inflation, all of those things really, as important as they are, if we have a dictator in the White House, a dictator over democracy, what is the purpose? Those issues really don't even matter because the dictator gets what he wants. So everybody is definitely worried. Even people that voted against me for one of my opponents tell me that they were definitely worried about our democracy. So I think it is very front and center with a lot of people. And being out here on the campaign trail for President Biden, I'm in Pennsylvania right now. One of the things, people are definitely worried about it. It resonates with people. And as people have talked about, he's talking about retribution and imprisoning his political opponents. And people are really worried about that.
Not just around President Trump, but even around the events of January the 6th. When you're out on the campaign trail, speaking to voters in Pennsylvania, how much are they thinking about it? How much do they remember what happened that day? How central is it in their thinking as they plan to go to the elections in November?
One of the things that we've been hearing a lot is a lot of people say Democrats need to move on from January 6th. But Donald Trump talks about it every day that he holds a rally. He is front and center about pardoning the rioters that attacked the police officers on January 6th. So Donald Trump is making it a campaign issue also. Let's be completely clear about that. But people want to know the truth. And there are voters out there that no matter what Donald Trump says, no matter what he does, will not stray from him, no matter what. That's fine. But the people that we are trying to reach, the independent voters, the Republicans who don't have a political home, that the people that believe that democracy is really on the ballot, people that believe in that, those are the people we're trying to reach out here now. And